A pillar of jazz history, Ron McClure's bass lines have anchored some of the most iconic ensembles in the genre. From his groundbreaking work with Charles Lloyd's classic quartet and Wynton Kelly to his innovative contributions with Blood, Sweat, and Tears. McClure's influences span generations. His collaborations with jazz legends like Wes Montgomery, Keith Jarrett, and Joe Henderson showcase a career of boundless creativity and virtuosity. Today, we delve into the life and legacy of a musician who continues to inspire. So, Ron, good to speak with you over the phone.
Good to speak to you.
So, Ron, the first thing I wanted to say was, I'm so glad to speak to you because, you've played on two of my all-time favorite jazz albums to which have affected me. I could not tell you. Joe Henderson live at the Lighthouse and Wes Montgomery in Seattle. So just want to thank you
Really,
personally for playing on those records.
I get that a lot about the Joe Henderson, especially.
Yeah, there was something, you and Lenny, the way you his ride cymbal and you played just was incredible.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I mean, I never really heard myself like I do on the records. And they recorded with a pickup, unfortunately. So it's not really the sound of my bass. It was live, you know. So it didn't give the acoustic sound. I've never really liked the bass sound.
Oh,
But,
really?
well, I mean, it's all from some, like a Parkinson Berry pickup or something. It's not a mic. They didn't mic my bass, you know.
Oh, wow. So when you go back and listen to that recording, I mean, even though you're not, too crazy about the sound of the bass, was there any particular track that you really liked the energy, the more so than another track?
I like Invitation. So I'm just playing with Joe for quite a while.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
one. So when you were playing on that gig, was it like was there a little bit of added stress because you knew you were going to be recording?
Oh no, that was not a factor. We had played about three other gigs up north in San Francisco and in Oakland before we came down. Actually, there's a bootleg recording of the gig that we did at the Both And on Divisadero in San Francisco, which I like even better than the album. I
Oh
thought we
wow.
played better there,
Oh,
but
well,
yeah,
it's so no,
so
it's such
happened to record.
okay. Got it, got
But
it.
yeah, but we had been playing for a while, and we rehearsed quite a while before that. So
Yeah.
I was well into it and felt pretty good.
Yeah, well, I just had to tell you that because that's one of the records that really it's one of those jazz life-changing moments for me. But even either way, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being a professional musician. There's a lot of mystery about what it's like to be a jazz musician, not just for the um, people who don't play music, but for jazz musicians. Is there a common misconception about being a jazz bassist you wish more people understood?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there always has been, probably always will be. I don't think too many people understand, first of all, what jazz really entails in terms of improvisation, being in the moment, and improvising. I think people think that we practice all this stuff and go out and play the same thing every time. And some people do that, of course. But I don't think too many people have a picture of what it's like. I mean, most of the people that I grew up with listening to didn't live very long.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, it was a lifestyle, and I guess a lot of people think of jazz musicians as being some kind of um, misfits or derelicts or something. You know, that is this whole connection with alcohol and drugs. I mean, and from its beginnings, you know,
Yeah, and smoking cigarettes too. I know.
being cool, you know, smoking cigarettes, and the music was played in bars. And Charles Lloyd didn't want to play in saloons, as he called them, and we played for Bill Graham out in San Francisco and in New York
Oh wow, yeah.
at the Fillmore, East and West. And what was cool about that is there was no alcohol, and it was big venue where you paid a small fee to get in. You heard three bands in one night. You had a light show, and you could sit on the floor with your friends and walk around. I mean, it wasn't like sitting in a nightclub with a minimum, a cover charge, and a waitress bugging you for drinks.
Yeah. So totally different atmosphere than what we're used to.
We never played a jazz club.
Wow. You know, Ron, you've played with so many people. I don't know, the list goes on, and I'm sure you have all these stories you could share with me. But there's one question I wanted to ask you, for someone who's had such a extensive career. Um, if there was Groundhog Day, like the movie, and you had to do one concert every day over and over and over, was there anything that stands out to you, or maybe two that the music just reached another level for you personally?
Well, there's several.
What
I
comes to
mean,
mind?
you get to a point with the band, like with Charles Lloyd, for instance, where I wasn't being the traditional bass player in the sense I had left Wes Montgomery and Wynton Kelly to join Charles a year before, and we played some concerts. I mean, I think at Reed College in Portland, Oregon was the last one we did. We did it like 2 or 3 years in a row. And those kids were so bright, and it was such an interesting place to play because they were so into it. And you reach different levels, and you don't do that often.
It's hard to get to, right?
You just feel like you're out of it. It's almost like an out of body experience.
Yeah, I understand completely. And let's talk a little bit about the educational aspect, because I met you at NYU about 15 years ago. You kindly played during my audition. When you're mentoring somebody, a young musician, what's the most important thing you think they should know based on your experience?
Well, that's a good question. First, they have to show up, which is a problem sometimes. I get a lot of students that are not music majors, so it's I have a wide view of what that is for those people because they're not going to become professionals. So I start with what they like, basically, because they want to play songs right away, even if they've never played the bass. Do you have any songs I can play? I said, well, I mean, first you have to get a sound, then you have to get some hands where you know where the notes are. Then you have to find a way to play what you like. Maybe you should just try to find it. I talk about discovery a lot because you really discover this music. I didn't have a Berklee School of Music to go to when I was a kid. There were no jazz books. There was no fake book. There were no videos. There was no internet. So I discovered this music pretty much on my own just from listening. And the hardest part is telling them what they need to do to get to the point where they can play. And it was different with jazz majors. I mean, most of them are already pretty advanced before they even get to NYU.
Certainly. And maybe the people who aren't majoring in music, they don't realize the sacrifice and all the time it takes to really get there.
No, they have no idea. They think it's like turning on a radio. I mean, and they figured that since they're paying for the lessons, it's incumbent upon me to do the work. They don't see any reason to do any work. Try to explain why somebody should practice their scales to build their hands. They don't even know what that means.
Yeah,
They have no idea what that
oh, sorry.
encompasses.
Yeah, it always struck me like as I couldn't believe that you were teaching non-music majors. I mean, looking on the outside in it was very unusual for me to observe that. And then you're talking about having to deal with these, things that you're talking about. But even, let me ask you a question, because those musicians are non-jazz musicians, I suppose. And when it comes to inspiration for you and your playing, what non-jazz musician has most inspired you, or any bands over the years, would you say?
What non-jazz musicians?
Yes.
You mean in terms of what kind of music?
Sure.
Well, I mean, my first influences were Red Prysock, hand clapping, and Bill Haley and his Comets. You know, like Rock Around the Clock. Those are the first things I heard. That wasn't really jazz.
Mm-hmm.
It was blues, and it was swinging. And they both had acoustic bass, and that's where it began. I didn't realize it until much later that that really turned me on. I mean, before that, I had listened to the radio in New Haven, which is about 70% Italian. I heard a lot of accordion music, so I studied accordion between the ages of 5 and 15. And then I got to high school, and they said, well, we know you play accordion, you know music, we need you in the band, but you're not playing that. We'll teach you how to play the bass. So then I got gigs with this band in New Haven called the Kingsmen. They were guys that went to Yale, Art College of Music in Rensselaer. They were older guys. And they turned me on to my teacher, Joe Iadone, and they told me what records to listen to and turned me on to Blue Train. John Coltrane was the first real jazz record I had. I had been listening to Art Van Dam Quintet. It's like George Shearing with accordion instead of piano. So that was jazz. It was a different kind. When I heard Blue Train, then I heard Paul Chambers, Cook and Work and Steam and Relax, and the Miles Davis records. They came out the same year. I was hooked.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's got to be when you're going from listening to Paul Chambers and having to, I guess, take his place, I guess you could say, right? Or, you know, when you play with Wynton, was that how it kind of went?
Well, I played opposite Paul in 1964 for 6 weeks at the Hotel Consulate in Manhattan. And I went up to him and I said, Paul, my name is Ron. I love your music. He said, oh, no, you're the cat. You're the cat. He walked away from me. We never talked again.
Wow.
He was obviously very depressed and not doing well. And a year later, he didn't show up for a gig in Atlantic City with Wes Montgomery and the Wynton Kelly Trio. And I had opened for them with Maynard Ferguson's big band. So I'm standing there with my bass off to the side of the stage, waiting to hear these jazz icons. So Jimmy Cobb hits a couple rim shots and signals for me to get over there and play with him. He said, Paul didn't make it. You got to play with us. So I played with him. And then a month later, we had the same double bill in New York City at the Village Gate. And Ron Carter had replaced Paul for gigs in town. And he was late because he was doing a recording session. So Wynton asked me if I would play the first set because Paul wasn't there. Then Ron wasn't there. The next day, Ron Carter called me. He said, I'll give you $20 if you play the first set again tonight because I'm still doing that record date. I don't know if I got the $20, but Wynton took my number that night. And shortly after that, he called me and he said, we're going to the West Coast for 9 weeks. Would you like to go?
It changed. That's something that just like, I can't even imagine the feeling that you felt in that moment.
It was wonderful playing with them. The music was so joyous and buoyant. The language was simple after playing with Charles Lloyd. We were playing a lot of free stuff, and they didn't play like Keith Jarrett, Jack DeJohnette, and Charles Lloyd. They were playing really straight ahead jazz, but they swung so hard and it was so joyous. Wes was always smiling. Wynton was like Santa Claus too. I mean, they're the nicest people, and the people loved it. And we packed clubs, and I don't know if we did any concerts. We played mostly clubs.
Yeah,
that was great.
When you look back on your career now, is that what you're most grateful for? Would you say just those moments, or is it just being able to sustain a career overall, or is it that you've maintained an active team? What are you most grateful for right now? I'm just kind of curious.
The fact that I got to do it. I mean, the reward is in the doing of it. It's not what you get from it so much. And I got to New York at a time when, in 1962, I was 20 years old, 21 years old. And there was all kinds of bands to play with. I would go from one band to the other. And there weren't a lot of bass players. and I was young and I was well trained and I had been playing for quite a long time. And I got right into it right away. And one thing led to another. I met a lot of people and got to play with people like Thelonious Monk and Marion McCartland, Herbie Mann. You know, Buddy Rich was the first band I played with. And Mike Nock, he came up to Hartford when I was going to school in Hartford. And when I came to New York, he got me with Buddy Rich. And we drove across the country to Las Vegas on my birthday, November 22nd, 1963. That's the day that we arrived at Vegas, and that's the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I'll never forget that. And we played for about 6 weeks with Buddy Rich, and I came back. Micah Benny was on that band, piano player, and when we got back to New York, he went back with Maynard Ferguson's band, and he got me on Maynard's band. So I worked with the big band for a while, then we worked with the sextet for a while. There was always something, you know, one door would close and another would open.
And there just seemed like there wasn't that much space in as far as time. Like you could just go from one thing to the next, you know?
Well, in the 60s, that was the truth. I mean, especially after, I'd say 64, 65, I'd been there a couple of years. And at one point I was playing with Wes Montgomery, Wynton Kelly. I was playing with Charles Lloyd at the same time. I was playing with Keith Jarrett as Vanguard. And God knows what else. I mean, the Wes Montgomery record and the Charles Lloyd album from Montreux, 1967, were just a couple of months apart.
Yeah, it's incredible that you got to participate on those records. I mean, it's just there's not what else is there to say, right?
I was in those bands. I mean, at the same time, none of them worked all the time.
Right.
And the same thing with Michel Petrucciani later on. I was playing with Dave Lehman at Quest, and I was playing with Michel Petrucciani's trio with Elliot Zygmunt. And we didn't work that much, so there wasn't any conflict usually. And at one point, Michel said, well, you know, what do you want to do? You want to play with them or you want to play with me? And I said, I want to do both. And then, of course, his manager had him, you know, get to Steve Gadd and Anthony Jackson ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And he, you know, for the name, they were great. They were icons, you know. And they didn't play the same way we did together, but he went on to, you know, greater things. Unfortunately, he didn't live too long.
Yeah, unfortunately. Ron, I wanted to also ask you about playing the bass in terms of growth, because growing as a musician can sometimes mean unlearning things. Um, Anything come to mind if I ask you something you needed to let go of to become a better musician that you had kind of latched onto?
Well, what comes to mind, if I'm interpreting your question properly, is if you want to change something, you have to, they say, well, insanity is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Yes.
So if you're tired of doing something, or if you want to move away from, say, playing traditional harmony or avoiding the thumb position on the bass or something, well, you move in to a new area and you pick out furniture, you know. You just stop doing what you were doing and really focus on doing something else. So after a while, it might happen for you.
Sure. And many musicians turn to this music as a way to cope with, life's challenges. And it's almost like a lot of people I've met, they started playing jazz at the right time when they were maybe going through something, or, they use it as somewhat of an emotional release. Have you found that the music provides you with like an emotional release or maybe sense of healing when you play?
Well, I've always said that the only time I really feel good, I mean, you could be very sick and play music and you forget all about it. I've had that happen when I was in Europe and I had dysentery because of the water. And I really didn't feel like playing. And they said, oh, come on, you have to play. By the time I got on the bandstand and started playing, I forgot all about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the powers of it.
Yeah, but really is the only time I you really get to a place where it's like an out of body experience. It takes over. And I don't know if anything else in life could be like that.
I agree with you in that, it's, I mean, playing jazz is certainly not about the money. You have to get something else from it.
Well, you're really in the moment. I mean, if you're really doing it. I mean, if I think this is the problem I have with the ensembles I have at NYU. They're playing at the same time and they're playing the same tune, but they're not really playing together because they haven't experienced that joy and the wonderment of playing something that is relevant to what other people are playing.
Do you
It's
think
like
that
having
has
a conversation, a cell phone, or a group of people at a table. There's four people at a table talking to someone somewhere else on a cell phone. They're not speaking to each other. They might be speaking at the same time.
Yeah, they're finding that the communication is just not there between the
Yeah.
young
I
musicians.
mean, I think these kids are just trying to play something that they can play, and they don't really hear what anybody else is doing. Because they're still trying to figure out something that they could play, and they don't. There's no question and answer kind of thing. They don't really adjust what they're doing because somebody else did something amazing.
Unfortunately, one of the things, I mean, for me, like as you know, I mentioned, NYU, I went to Berkeley for an undergraduate degree, but then like just something kind of like a light switch went off where I felt like I was finally able to improvise, or at least play what I was hearing. Do you think it's maybe that a light switch needs to go off sometimes for some people? Like, oh, this is how you do it?
I don't. I don't get what you just said.
Oh, so maybe like they're trying and trying and trying, but they're just not getting it. But then maybe something, one day it just clicks for them.
Yeah, I guess it's like that. I remember when the time when I was playing the accordion with the buttons on the left hand and the keyboard on the right hand, and you're playing two entirely different things. You're playing rhythm with the left hand, and you're playing melody and harmony with the right. And it's like kind of like chewing gum and walking at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember when that happened, and I also remember the first improvised solo I ever played. I was playing the accordion with a dance band in high school, and they said, "You got it," and I said, "Got what?" And we're playing these complex tunes with lots of chords, and I had no idea what to do.
You just went for it.
So, I mean, you get to it. I mean, it comes with time. I mean, in experience, I think that's the most important thing. You just have to be doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And these kids that I see today don't play that much, and they don't have the opportunities that I have.
Yeah, they're playing at home mostly and recording it on Instagram.
Well, people don't even talk to each other so much anymore. They don't work together. I mean, we've become isolated, especially since COVID.
Yeah, that's true.
People work from home. I mean, they have their little world where they have so many things they can do online, and everything's provided for them. And you can watch live shows from like places like Smalls where I play. I mean, you can watch it live, or you can dial it up like later and watch it, and you don't have to go out and watch it on your computer or something.
Do you think is that sad, or is that just it is what it is?
Well, it is what it is, but it's like it's really killed them. I mean, there's no retail anymore. I mean, I live in New York City, and things are going out of business, because restaurants and stuff like that, and shops and stores, because people buy everything online.
Yeah, Amazon.
Well, it's the same thing with music. I mean, you have too many choices now. I mean, just think of the veritable plethora of choices you have to listen to music on, music TV, like online, all these things, Spotify, Pandora, all these different things, YouTube. I mean, you're inundated with possibilities. So people aren't as focused as they were. I mean, as we were. I mean, I was focused on jazz. I never really listened to a lot of other kind of music growing up because I wasn't aware of it.
Right. Ram, before, this is great. I'm so glad I got a chance to speak with you. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, just one more question. What does success mean to you as a jazz artist? I mean, because I think it changes as the years go by, but right now, what is success for you as a jazz musician, would you say?
Well, getting to do what you do. I mean, Red Mitchell, one of my favorite bass players, and it was a close friend of mine, he says success is creating a job for what you do. And I've managed to do pretty much what I do my whole life. I haven't, I've done Broadway shows and jingles, and I've been teaching, and I write and arrange, and, I do all kinds of other things, mostly related to what I do. I mean, I've never had to take a job doing something just for the money.
Yeah, just doing music your whole life.
Yeah,
It's a blessing.
that's a major accomplishment. And I've got to play with the people I played with. I mean, I got here at the right time to play with some of the icons who are no longer with us. And my students can't do that because they're not around.
Yeah. I mean, for me talking to you, it's like I look at it like as someone who loves like I was telling you that Joe Henderson record so much.
Yeah.
It would not be what it is without the way you played. I mean, granted you don't like the recording, but
Well, I kind of carried it in a way. I mean, the bass is very prominent on those records. I
absolutely.
like the one, the Gazelle I'm on a record called In Pursuit of Blackness. It's
Darkness
the
is color,
second
right?
album
That's
from
it's
the
called, right?
Lighthouse.
Is it called In Pursuit of Blackness, Darkness is Color, something like that?
It's called In Pursuit of Blackness. It's on Milestone.
Right.
It's the second album. It's the second release from the Lighthouse.
Got it.
And on the other side is Joe Henderson with a studio band in New York with Stanley Clarke on bass, which is the first time I heard Stanley. And we played this tune, Joe Henderson's tune, Gazelle, which is an amazing composition. And it was very hard. And I nailed that one.
No, I love it. I mean, just for me, just to tell you that I mean that the way that it's so swinging and like
Have you heard of that? Have you heard that track?
I heard the what's it called, the No Me Escape off that track. But I've definitely heard. I just have to revisit it. I think I
Well,
heard.
it's on a different album. It's not on the first one was called "If You're Not Part of the Solution, You're Part of the Problem."
Is that the one with Vis a Vis on it?
It's got when Load for Joe.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah.
I don't remember all the titles.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to revisit it, but
But the second one really was nice. Then there's a bootleg on Everest. There was one long tracks that wouldn't fit on an LP. Because in those days, there was a consideration of time because, you could get maybe 20, 22 minutes on one side of an album.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I mean, you got a CD, you can put like 75 minutes.
CDs aren't even a thing anymore, but yeah, Ron, I want to thank you so much for speaking with me.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Somebody wants my opinion on her, to hear my stories.
Your opinion is valid, sir.
Okay.